If you're looking to buy a business and you want to consider using a forgivable seller note as part of the purchase price, I've seen a couple deals here in the last couple of weeks where a forgivable seller note really makes a lot of sense. So the deals where I think this makes sense is when the business is fluctuating quite a bit and it's hard to determine what a fair price is. So I've seen this in situations recently where revenue and profit have really expanded in the last year. And so the seller obviously wants to sell the business based on last year's revenue and profit, maybe not the last 3 years. And the buyer wants to say, well, what if this was just a 1 year kind of random event and, it's going to go back down to more of an average level over the last 3 years. And so that you can't come to terms on a sales price. So this is a good example where I think a forgivable seller note can make some sense. What you might do in that situation is try to get an SBA loan to help cover the purchase price or the portion of the acquisition that would have cash flowed in the slower years. So look back at years 2 and 3 and say, okay, this business would have cash flowed a $2 million SBA loan, but hey, in the last year, it would have actually cash flowed a $4 million SBA loan, but we're not comfortable taking an SBA loan for $4 million. So there's the situation where you say, okay, we're going to do a $2 million SBA loan because it would have cash flowed all 3 of the last 3 years. And we're going to do a seller note, a forgivable seller note for that last portion, and maybe you split the difference somewhere in there. But then what that allows you to do is it helps the seller feel like they're not leaving too much on the table, and it protects the buyer. And I'm not a lawyer, so please, get a lawyer that knows what they're doing, working on SBA loans and forgivable seller notes. But the basic idea here is that you would say, okay, if sales drop below, pick your number. So if they were $3 million in revenue last year, and you say, hey, if sales drop below 2.5 million in any of the next X number of years during the term of the seller note, we don't have to pay the seller note that year. Maybe that payment is even deferred to the end of the note, or it's just forgiven altogether. You could potentially look at it on a year by year basis. So for example, you wouldn't necessarily say, hey, 1 year we dip below this threshold, and so we forgive the entire rest of the seller note. It might be that we forgive this year's portion of the seller note. So maybe there's just an annual payment on the seller note, and you look back at the previous year and you say, how did we do? If we didn't hit this certain sales number, we don't owe the payment this year. But if we hit that sales number next year, we owe the payment again. And that 1 year worth is forgiven or potentially deferred. So that's a structure I've seen outlined that I think can work to try to help, protect you as the buyer from downside and also still give the seller some upside if things continue to go well.